This is Love as a Virtue and Care as its Aspect, The View of Philippa Foot by Michal. And this is in the Pro-Phil journal. I don't know what this journal is, never seen it before, but hey, give it a shot. And so, I mean, might be out of like somewhere in Eastern Europe, but whatever. And here we go, as always. Could be good, could be bad. I don't know, never read it before. Feel free to ask questions along the way. I will do my best to explain it. I don't know what's coming. I don't endorse this. And as always, if you stick around to the end, we rate the paper. And you get to spam some emotes, which is always fun. So here we go. Intro. The concept of love is multifaceted, often understood as a blind effect, an evolutionary survival mechanism, or a theological virtue. Okay, to Caudillo's point, why do we actually think of this as a virtue is that we do have a history that calls it a virtue, but there are other ways of viewing it. Is like you could look at it in terms of the scientific aspect, like evolutionary, like the evolutionary benefit of what love brings to the species in terms of evolution. Okay, conceptualizing love as a naturally acquired moral virtue, that is, as a consciously and voluntarily cultivated disposition akin to temperance or courage, presents a unique challenge. In this paper, we address this challenge by reconstructing Philippa Foot's view on love, drawing specifically on her seminal work, Natural Goodness. Okay, so, Caudillo, to your question, you may already assume that, like, there's a virtue of love, but how do we cultivate this? Because like all virtues, they have to be cultivated. Virtue, you may be lucky and just have it inherent in you, but generally in like the tradition of virtue ethics and virtue in general, you have to cultivate your habits to have them be in a good position, like to have the right sort of disposition to be virtuous. It's a I can't speak. Cultivation of your soul, which then gives you proper habits, and from there you have virtue, not the other way around. You don't just learn the virtue and then just have it. You have to like cultivate yourself, and then you are virtuous. Author's analysis will proceed in three main parts. First, we will introduce the foundational premises for understanding love within modern virtue ethics. Next, we will examine the content of the virtue of love, which we define as the fulfillment of natural needs based on the natural normativity of a species life form. We will argue that this fulfillment directly contributes to the flourishing of individuals. Finally, we will discuss the formal aspect of this virtue, conceptualizing it as a consciously and voluntarily acquired disposition of the will. This is what I'm talking about. Like, this is what makes it like straight up like classical virtue stuff. We will demonstrate that its activity is embedded within a framework of naturally good ends and integrates both cognition, planning, judgment, and emotional elements, goodwill, cordiality, and mindfulness. Ultimately, we argue that understanding care as an aspect of love provides a compelling and enriching perspective on its content. This interpretation is not only consistent with Philippa Foot's work, but also highlights a substantive connection between love and care. Both are fundamentally concerned with fulfilling natural goods and protecting against their harm, thereby contributing to a flourishing life. Okay, so this seems like super Aristotelian. Like, we're just like, where's Aris when you need him? Like, he's just like probably lurking. But this is just like, we're going to update whatever we think of love as nowadays into this sort of like neo-Aristotelian sort of framework. It just feels very classically Aristotelian. We've got like, we're gonna, work on our soul and get our dispositions in the right place so that we have virtue. The return of virtue ethics, from rules to character. The contemporary focus on love as a virtue is a direct result of the broader resurgence of virtue ethics, which some scholars have described as a conjuncture of virtues. Virtue, Aristotle or Socrates? So it's a little muddled exactly, but if you're going to talk about like theory, DeMarshall, Aristotle has the real theory. Socrates, of course, he said a lot of shit, but like it was all written down by other people. So if you're going to go by the theory, it's always Aristotle. Unreal says, Foot was one of a group of women at Oxford who revived Aristotelian virtue ethics. Yeah. Hey, what's up, Unreal? Yeah, been lurking. Appreciate that. Latvian says, this is what I think of when I think of the general case of a philosophy paper. Yeah, I mean, this feels very sort of philosophy paper-y. Now, for better or worse, I mean, for all we know, this is, like I said, I've not read this journal before, so it may be great philosophy, but also may just be stock shit. And this, at the moment, is coming off as just a very standard philosophy paper. And that's not to say it's bad. It could be very, very, very good. It could be excellent. It's just not doing anything crazy at the moment. Unreal says also Anscombe along with her Wittgenstein work, Hearst House, and Iris Murdoch prior to all her novels. Yeah. That was like the group. It's Foote, Anscombe, Hearst House, and Murdoch, I believe, were like this crew who kind of brought it back. Okay, the historical turn in philosophy is characterized by a reevaluation of emotions and a critical response to the so-called legalistic paradigm in moral theory, which had dominated much of modern philosophy since the Enlightenment. This paradigm views moral reasoning primarily through the lens of impartiality and abstraction. Moral rules are seen as universal commands to which an individual submits out of duty, regardless of context or personal character. Yeah, so this is the deontology people that they're talking about. That's what was running everything. However, as Michael Stocker noted, such an exclusive focus on the rational part of human beings leads to a schizophrenia where the reasons for an action become detached from the actual motives. A person acts rationally, but their emotions remain inconsistent with those actions. Stocker argues that a good life, in contrast, requires the harmony between a person's motives and their reasons, as well as between their values and their justifications. Yeah, Justin Timberlake voice. I don't think I can do that at the moment. Bring sexy back, yeah. This critique highlights a key insight of virtue ethics, that moral reflection must be extended to a person's entire character and inner life. Yeah, this is the disposition thing I said earlier. In doing so, it moves beyond simple behavioral rules to consider how an individual thinks and feels and how these elements relate to their overall well-being. As a result, ethical theories were reoriented to center on the questions of happiness, the good life, interpersonal relationships, and love. The nature of moral guidance also changed. Instead of strict commands, it offers recommendations and advice, reflecting a focus on character development rather than just obedience. Thinkers like G.E.M. Gertrude Anscombe, and Philippa Foote had a fundamental impact on the revival of virtue ethics. Foote's work is particularly significant for its rigorous defense of a naturalistic virtue ethics by articulating and defending its neo-Aristotelian form. Yeah, so again, this is just straight history here, but yes, this is exactly what happened. She argued that moral evaluation is fundamentally connected to what is good for a living thing based on its species-specific nature or life form. Her philosophy rejects the idea of an abstract universal moral law and instead grounds moral facts in the objective reality of human life. For Foote, virtues are not just traits we happen to value, but dispositions necessary for human flourishing. This framework provided a powerful non-subjectivist basis for moral reasoning that directly confronts the schizophrenia critiqued by Stocker and opened the way for a deeper discussion of virtues like love. So yeah, you gotta keep in mind, there is this problem in both deontology and consequentialism that the virtue ethicist has over both of them. I heard recently, this goes back to now I'm blanking on the name because streamer brain. But it was this guy in New York, Bernard Williams. Bernard Williams said it's called the one thought too many. I didn't realize it was Bernard Williams. But if you have to start considering who to save, you have to let me check the categorical imperative, or let me go check what how much good is actually coming out of me saving a person before I go save them to make sure I can't be doing something better with my time. That's the wrong way for a human being to be. You should just go save someone who's drowning if you have the power to save them. You shouldn't be checking some abstract theory. And this is what the virtue ethicist has. It says you have the disposition to just go save the person. You don't have to go check what is a virtue. You have the disposition to go save the person. You don't have this extra thought about, is this going to be morally right? No, that's the wrong sort of thing going on here. And so this is a criticism the virtue ethicist can lay on the other major ethical theories going around nowadays. Lapstein says, Marx, do the thing, stop wanking the ideal. Yeah, I mean, that's fair too. The Marxists are saying, look, you have to be in the world. It's not, you're not dealing with some abstract bullshit, and that's fair too. Like the Marxists, they're like materialists, and so they're also looking at not some abstract thing as governing your life. You have to be in the world and like be revolutionary, as we were just talking about. Content and formal aspects of virtue. Philippa Foot's philosophy is a form of ethical naturalism that grounds moral judgments in objective facts about the natural world, specifically in the life forms of living things. I mean, being Wittgensteinian, I just, every time I see life in the life forms of living things, I just keep reading form of life of living things. So it's just kind of funny there. Okay. But I mean, that would go to the Anscombe. This framework provides a robust foundation for understanding the content and purpose of virtues like love. Foote distinguishes between two types of goodness. Natural goodness is an intrinsic quality determined by an organism's relationship to its own species life form. This life form represents a species-specific standard that includes characteristic physical traits, behaviors, and habits. For a living creature, natural goodness means fulfilling the ends necessary for a flourishing life, such as self-preservation and reproduction. These goods are inherent to the species and do not depend on external wishes or preferences. Yeah, so these are, hierarchy of needs shit. In contrast, extrinsic goodness is an external evaluation that depends on the relationship to another species' purpose. For example, a good carrot is extrinsically good for a rabbit because it serves the rabbit's needs, but its own natural goodness is determined by how well it grows according to its own life form. This distinction is crucial because it demonstrates that morality is not based on subjective human desires, but on objective facts about what is good for a particular species. Foote argues that a species' life form can be understood through natural historical judgments or Aristotelian categories, which are teleological judgments that describe the characteristic behaviors and states leading to flourishing and are, quote, binding insofar as they describe the natural or non-statistical normal behavior of a member of its species, end quote. For instance, a bee's natural historical judgment is to dance when it finds nectar. A bee that fails to do so is a naturally defective example of its species. Foote makes the bold claim that this same logical framework applies to humans, grounding morality in objective natural facts. Yeah, that's a little weird. Like, so say you find some gold, like bees find nectar, you find gold, and you're like, I ain't telling fucking nobody. And she'd say, well, that might be a statistical anomaly. Wouldn't you want to share your good find with everyone else? It's like, fuck no. They're going to kill me and take my gold. It's like, that's not a good idea, actually. A weird sound, I guess. Yeah. Weird but sound. Yeah, so there's a question, like, is this actually plausible when it comes to humans? But that's why, I mean, the author here was just like, bold claim. This is a big deal. Like, it's who knows if this actually makes sense. But yeah, because when it comes to people, it's very hard to make these arguments. Maybe other stuff, but not people. Okay, this framework provides the basis for understanding Aristotelian necessities, the things a species needs to flourish. These necessities are both real and moral facts. Okay, so I guess what you could say is that, look, if you have a ton of food and there are people starving and you don't need the food, you should give them the food. And if you don't, that would be basically morally like wrong. Like, you'd be maybe a deviant human being at that point because you're just saving stuff on principle and you don't give a shit if your fellow humans die. That would be bad. Maybe this like pot of gold is a little excessive, but like just if it was like some food that like your community needs and you were just going to leave it there and not tell anyone, that would be deviant behavior. Yeah, like, so I guess like, yeah, if you were all looking for water and you found like a spring of water, you'd just tell the people, look, there's where you get the water. And that would be, make some sense. Managed scarcity, yeah. So I guess like when it gets to more complicated stuff, humans are different. But if we were just talking about like getting by, basically, I guess this is not a crazy thought. Okay, virtue as a quality of the rational will. While the goodness of plants and animals is related to their biological cycle, human flourishing is not necessarily based on these factors alone. To understand what constitutes human goodness, we must look at what kind of living thing a human being is. Foote argues that we are fundamentally rational creatures who can act based on goals we recognize ourselves. When we evaluate a person as good, we are not assessing their biological traits, but rather the qualities and defects of their rational will. This rational will is the human life form, which contains intrinsic standards for determining whether a specific person is a good or defective example of their life form. Moral quality, therefore, concerns the quality of one's thinking and actions. A virtuous person possesses practical wisdom, phronesis. I mean, this, like, you can see how Aristotelian this is, just like use the Aristotle's term, which allows them to select the right goals, not just efficient means to an end. These goals arise from the reality of the human life form, which includes not only physical needs, but also fundamental psychosocial needs for trust, respect, recognition, and affection. Please love me, your streamer. Please, we need all the recognition in the world. Yeah. Get a... yeah. It's always a thing. It's like, why is someone on stage? Why do they want, like, the adoration? But yes. So, this... you know, in terms of like maybe the most simple stuff, sounds at least somewhat plausible. Like, people want food and like you need all the stuff for human life, but also you need some sort of socialization in life. Once you get beyond the basics, then things get complicated. But like at the sort of like baseline level, like, you know, food and some basic human relationships and stuff like that, I guess you could like be okay with this sort of thing. All right. Love as a virtue. According to Foote, virtues are positive and lasting dispositions of the rational will that are not innate but learned. She understands the will broadly to include actions, intentions, attitudes, and feelings, giving virtues both a cognitive and emotional dimension. Virtues also serve a corrective function against harmful human tendencies. While all virtues are beneficial, some, like justice and love, are particularly beneficial to others and may require personal sacrifice. Love, like other virtues, is not just an internal psychological state. It is a disposition aimed at achieving good ends. It manifests in care, which includes not only feelings, but also consciously directed action and effort for the well-being of others. It is in care as an aspect of love that the schizophrenia identified by Stocker is overcome, as reasons for action are unified with motives and emotions. According to Hanel, Foote, without subordinating reasons to motives and motives to reasons, has developed a concept which does not allow such schizophrenia to arise at all. End quote. Wov, twoo, wov. Why we're here today. Yeah, now you've got Princess Bride in my fucking head. I'm like thinking like Andre the Giant. You are here, but soon you will not be here. I am here. Whatever that was. Anyway, in Foote's view, a good person's desires and actions are intrinsically unified because both are directed towards pursuing natural goods. This demonstrates that human enjoyment, happiness, and flourishing are inseparable from pursuing morally good ends, as expressed in natural goods. You know, there's a lot of shitty people. Your work here is done yet. There's a lot of shitty people that get a lot of good stuff in their life. And the idea that like some gangster is getting all the good things in the world out of love. It's like, no, they're getting it from killing people and taking their shit. Now, it's a very optimistic view of the world here. Marriage. Yes. Inconceivable. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about negation earlier, actually. It's like, is one thing necessarily, like, if it's true of one, then false of something else? It's like excluded middle. So, like, you know, that was the thing. It's like, I've poisoned one of these cups. Like, which one it is? I've poisoned I've put poison in the cups. You decide and we both drink. It's like, yeah. Well, the guy poisoned both cups because he was immune. Like, this is the third option. Okay. Only by accepting natural goods as moral norms of action tied to a particular life form can we exclude the possibility of connecting wickedness with happiness. Yeah, see, this is the thing. You will have to define the goods in life as being normatively good. Like, you have to define those lives as the only lives that matter, and then with the moral norms, and then that way you can be like, well, anything else is wicked, which is maybe a little excessive. Exclude the possibility of connecting wickedness with happiness. You have to have a certain form of life to be happy, even if you have all the goods in your life. Like a gangster got all the goods, they're not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy. See, I think that's a little bit of an excessive statement. Yeah. Okay, my voice is a little funky today. Care as a specific aspect and expression of love is a direct fulfillment of these goods, thereby becoming an inseparable part of a happy and fulfilled life. Yeah, a little bit romantic here, Philippa Foot. Like, oh yeah, the only human lives that are happy are the ones that are like, in this vision I have of life. What's up, Lumpy? How you doing? Good evening to you. I was lurking earlier, but I had to go shovel the fucking, outside. So, I didn't get to see your stream. But I hope you had a good stream earlier. Who did I shout out? I shout out Cosmolano. I understand their point. Yeah, it's not a crazy, glad to hear you're okay. Yeah. It's not a crazy point, but it just seems a very optimistic point that you can't be wicked and happy. Really? There's a lot of shitty people out there. I don't think they're all miserable. Like, we like to say that people are miserable, but I don't think they are. I mean, they might be, but yeah, it's hard to say. Like, how do I know how, like, crappy people feel? I felt good. I felt bad. Was I a crappy person when I felt bad? I've been a good person. You can feel bad. You can be a good person and feel terrible. You can be a bad person, probably feel good at certain points. Okay, you understand the point. Maybe that was debatable about the last sentence about care. That's fair. Yeah, so care is an aspect of expression of love, is direct fulfillment of these goods. Yeah, so how you relate to other people, and that's usually how care is understood in literature, is that, yeah, wicked is a charged word, fair. But like, yeah, care and how you relate to other people, like that, you're right. There is something to that. Am I on vacation? No, I'm not on vacation. Latfian says, I'm quite certain insert political despot was very happy with themselves when doing insert act of atrocity. Exactly. And if you know anything about like even recent, like pretty recent human history, certain groups of people really fucking hate other groups of people. And they are happy to watch those other motherfuckers die. They really are. Like they don't care. Or they're happy to see them go. And so, yeah. Lumpy, this is the United States of America. You don't get vacation unless you take vacation. And I did not take vacation. This is not a hate crime if they loved it. I don't know if that's how the U.S. government views it, but you might be right, Chocolate. Okay, to understand why Philippa Foot regards love as a genuine virtue, we must confront the philosophical challenge posed by Friedrich Nietzsche. What? What's Nietzsche have to do with any of this? Nietzsche argued that what society calls virtue is often a veiled form of self-interest, with Christian pity being a prime example of herd morality driven by resentment and weakness. While Foot acknowledges a psychological truth in Nietzsche's critique that acts of kindness can mask envy or egoism, she rejects his cynical conclusion. You completed the fish market. Cool. Cosmolano says, if you direct all your efforts toward your own fulfillment, then you also take from those around you and through practice become an insatiable whole and are therefore never actually satisfied. That's how I take it. Yeah. And you think that's true of society and their neighbors. That's fair. Now that might work on a large scale. Like if you are just a gluttonous person and you keep doing that. The problem here is that, like, yeah, not everyone is a gluttonous the whole time. Some people are greedy in short bits and they get satisfied for those bits. And you could be a terrible person, I feel like, and be satisfied and pretty happy, at least over certain periods of time. So, like, then maybe we're arguing about what different kinds of happy, like local versus global. But, like, this is the problem. It's not clear. But I take the point. Yeah. Rocco says, speaking of Nietzsche, I think the far right is also arguing that pity is just wasteful weakness. Shake man, it'd be cartoonish. Yeah. And that's the issue is what's the view of humanity here? Is it realistic or is it overly idealized? Is it cartoonish? That's part of the issue. What is the good life? And is it a cartoonish version of the good life here? Because if it is too cartoonish, then it's not good for like an ethics. You need it to be like something actual people do. Yeah, Rockophile, the right loves Nietzsche because, well, it's his philosophy can be easily abused, even though usually Nietzsche is actually pretty good. People like to abuse his philosophy, which is unfortunate for Nietzsche and everyone else. But yeah, the sin of empathy stuff. Yeah, the issue is if you think like understanding other people and how they feel is bad, you're a terrible person. You just are. Like, you're a bad person if you think understanding how other people feel is like weakness. Like, that's stupid. So they're basically, you know, doing apologetics. They're trying to find a rational explanation and philosophy to back up their terribleness, and they're using Nietzsche to do it, which is not Nietzsche's fault. But you know, that's just the way things go. Rocco says, I agree about Nietzsche. He's taken to an extreme that I don't think he'd agree with. Yeah, that's usually how it. If you read Nietzsche, he's not actually that insane usually. Unreal says Nietzsche's sister and brother-in-law, his literary executors, were actual Nazis, so it goes way back. Yeah, and they changed things he wrote, and they edited stuff the way it wasn't meant to be edited, so it makes it easier to abuse because they changed it along those lines. Which again is not Friedrich Nietzsche's fault. It's his sister and her shitty husband, shitty sister and shitty husband. So again, philosophy is going to be abused. This is not unique to Nietzsche. It's like, yeah, it's going to be abused. It's part of the, this is part of the job hazards of being a philosopher, is that some people think like, oh, like I do logic, my stuff's not going to be abused. Motherfucker, now it's getting abused in artificial intelligence. But it's part of the job hazards. Like, it's a job hazard. DeMar says he is a poet, though. Can't see his point, but maybe it's my fault. Some of it is poetic, but like his analysis of some philosophical pointers usually, like, some of his stuff is good. It just is. It might not be for you, and that's perfectly fair. If, like, you don't like Nietzsche, cool. Like, there's plenty of other philosophers out there, but I put him in, like, the group of, like, good philosophers in the last few hundred years. Latvian says a person's analysis of Nietzsche is a good way of vibe checking them. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's like one of those questions they say online, like, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? It's like, I don't ever think about the fucking Roman Empire unless it gets brought up. But, like, it's this centurion mentality that, like, what's a real man? If you're worried about, like, being a real man back in the day, it's like, yeah, there's something wrong with you because you can't define for yourself how to be a good person. So you're trying to make up some mythology that you need to appeal to be a good man, which is a very strange thing. But I guess that's the point of mythology. And that's one of the things Nietzsche talked about also. So it's like, that was part of his analysis. Okay, so does anyone else get to use aphorisms? Yes, people do get to use aphorisms. They're just really hard to write. So, you know, it's just not worth it to try to write in aphorisms. If you can do it, it's really good. 10 years as well as most because of his book, The Will to Power, which wasn't published by Nietzsche, but by Nietzsche's anti-Semitic sister. Yeah. Nietzsche was anti-Semitic and hated anti-Semites. There we go. You just thought about the Roman Empire. Yeah, again, that's part of the issue, Globus, of being a philosopher, is that you end up doing this shit. So it's like, what the funny thing is like, when was the last time we thought about the Roman Empire? It was like, oh, because Aris was talking about some cynic philosophy or something. I was like, yeah, last week. But then I realized they're talking, what the actual question happened to be about, like, did you think you were a real man today? But like, yeah, it's, that's, yeah, another job hazard of being a philosopher. Unreal Brian says, if you're a Midwestern guy, the Edmund Fitzgerald is your Roman Empire. We demoralized the 50th anniversary of the ships sinking. That's funny. Was Kant anti-Semitic? Probably. I don't know if he was specifically. He was horribly racist, though. So I don't really like Kant in general. So I'm not the person to be memorialized. Yeah, I figured you were like, that was kind of where it was going. DeMar says Spartans are more crazier than people with Roman Empire. Yeah. Oh, Cosmolana. Unfortunately, Kant was like super racist and has really terrible views on like anybody that's not like a white European male. Yeah. So, of course, there's a lot of neo-Kantians that try to fix his system to do stuff, but it's icky. It's very icky stuff. Yep. Okay. So we were talking about Foot defending like this critique from Nietzsche that say you can like pretend like you're being kind, but be really is a mask for other stuff. What are you sorry about? You're not. Nothing to be sorry about. Okay. She contends that his view is rather silly. Oh, she's saying Nietzsche is rather silly when confronted with the reality of people who find genuine happiness in helping others. For Foot, the love of a parent for their child is a powerful counterexample. In this case, a person's own good is so deeply intertwined with the good of another that the idea of self-interest becomes meaningless. This natural bond serves as evidence that virtuous love is real and selfless. According to Foot, Nietzsche's key error was ignoring the fundamental facts of human life, particularly our natural capacity for care, which is a main aspect of love. And see, this is fair. You get a counterexample to Nietzsche where he's saying, well, a lot of times you're being self-interested in this. And she's saying, well, that's not actually how people act or feel or how they report about this when they're actually doing these things. So it's like, okay, maybe they are, but also they might be doing something something else. Foot's defense of love as a virtue is central to her broader project of grounding morality in a naturalistic framework. Moral judgments, as we have shown, are a type of natural historical judgment about what is good for a living thing based on specific life form. For humans, this includes not only biological survival, but also our social and rational nature. The capacity for selfless love is therefore a fundamental part of what it means to be a flourishing human being. By rooting love in these objective facts, Foot rescues it from the subjective realm of emotion, showing it to be an indispensable component of a good life. Well, okay, if she's going to say it's fundamental, then she needs to say all people need to have this sort of loving care in them universally, or else it's a shitty life. And that's hard because people have a great variety of lives, and it would be tough to prove it across the full realm of human experience. That doesn't make her wrong. It just means that this argument would be very, very difficult to like prove or even argue for, saying that the kind of love that she has is a necessary component of a good human life. Because of the variety of human lives, she'd be automatically separating out a lot of lives, saying they're just not that good. And maybe she wants to, but that's tough. The objectivity of love is not found in subjective feelings, but in natural necessities, the fundamental ends and needs of human life. These are, quote, real moral facts ontologically independent of emotional cognitive states, end quote, and provide an objective basis for moral action. Love is a learned virtue precisely because it is a disposition to respond to these needs in others. It is an active, practical orientation toward the well-being of one's own and others, grounded in the objective truth of what it means for a human being to flourish. In this context, a parallel can be drawn to the Buddhist meditation practice of loving kindness, where a benevolent and compassionate attitude is systematically adopted and cultivated. This practice can support the philosophical view that love is a learned virtue, a character trait that develops through consistent effort. And this is fair. There are other traditions that say similar things. But again, that other people agree with you is only interesting because not everyone agrees with you. If you can be like, well, the Buddhists agree with me, it's like, okay, then you've got a Buddhist theory, maybe. Cool. But there's still a lot of other people out there. Latvian Jesus says, I personally don't think being self-interested is to be objected to in and of itself. I find egoism useful in that I don't have to appeal to a greater notion of goodness, and why I think belongs to that. Why what I think belongs to that, I think at the bottom of it is all very simple, and I want it claim, and that's enough justification. Yeah, you don't have to be doing this all the time, of course. Like, you can be like, well, I want this piece of cake as opposed to that piece of cake, and the loving kindness thing doesn't come into it because it's a matter of aesthetic taste and how you feel at the time. So it's like, it's not going to be, it may be in the background, but it doesn't have to be like all the time everywhere. So that's fair. Because Malal says, I agree with this person. If there's room for disagreement due to a true lack of generality, I think is essentially what you're saying, a linguistic issue. Love is too general a word, but is colloquially used for what they're describing. Fair. Yeah. Like, it may be just a certain version of like an attitude towards the world that they're using it in, and that might be the practice of like this compassionate attitude here in the Buddhist sort of tradition, and maybe that's what they mean, and that would be, okay, that you can cultivate a compassionate attitude in a certain sort of like Western way, we calling it love. That's cool. That could be fair. Okay, care, a key aspect of love. Latvian says, I'd rather simply just want socialized medicine, not cause its utilitarian benefit to any people. I just want it simply. Yeah. But see, that's the going back to the one thought too many argument, where it's like, you shouldn't be appealing to some like abstract theory. It should be just some disposition. Like, no, we want everyone to have care because that's how we feel about things. That's our attitude. And that care includes medical attention, medical care. It's like, this is why some of the great appeals of virtue ethics is this sort of this metaphysics, where it's very straightforward. Okay, care. Man, my nose is getting stuffed weird. Okay, a key aspect of love. The virtue of love is a complex disposition that includes care, attachment, and sympathy. Cookie, I want cookie. Yeah, exactly. I want a cookie. It isn't just a feeling that washes over a person. It is a skill that requires practical wisdom and effort. To love virtuously means actively seeking to support and help others, acting helpfully and willingly, that is, benevolently responding to the key needs of a species life form as expressed in natural historical judgments. This active effort is what distinguishes virtuous love from a fleeting emotion, because virtues, as we have already shown, resolve Stocker's schizophrenia between motives and reasons. Love embodies the harmony between one's own flourishing and the flourishing of others. It shows how a person's feelings and actions can be unified in the service of genuine human well-being. This connection between the cognitive and emotional aspects of love is not accidental. It is rooted in Foote's broader philosophical project, which seeks to show that moral judgments are a species of natural historical judgments that apply to all living things. Just as we can objectively judge a plant to be a good or bad specimen based on its ability to flourish, so too can we evaluate human beings. In the case of humans, however, this ability to flourish is tied to the unique features of our irrational will and our inherent psychological and social needs. For this reason, love, and especially its expression through care, is a foundational component of what it means to be a good person. It is a disposition that fosters the conditions for flourishing for oneself and for others based on a correct understanding of our shared human nature. Thanks to this interpretation, care as a significant aspect of love becomes the active core of the various forms of affection and affect. Yeah, patient nom nom. Everyone gets a cookie. You get a cookie. You get a cookie. Everyone gets a cookie. Caring love is not just a passive experience of feelings, but an active, rational, and emotional disposition that leads to actions contributing to the good of others. Care appears to plausibly bridge the emotional character of love with the appropriate type of action. Care as an aspect of love motivates us to take responsibility for ourselves and for others, making it not only a moral principle, but also a practical guide to living a good life. Okay, I just want to point out right here that care also has a wider discussion in the literature. You can just care for others in certain ways without love. You can still care for, You can have like a job. Part of your job might be to care for like, the plants or like whatever it is that you care for. And you may not love them. You may just do it out of work, but you may be a conscientious and careful person and give lots of good care as part of your job. So it's like you can have care without love. And so this playing into this like melding of the care talk with the love talk is very powerful, because there's a lot of discussion of care also and how you are oriented to other things. This, I think there's some Heidegger on this and how you are caring for how you are related to the things around you. Latvian says, I care for the victims of various genocides taking place rampantly and incessantly across our planet. Yeah, we don't do a very good job of that in general with people. Like, they're like, oh, people got shot far away. It's like, oh, what have we done about it? Nothing. But whatever. How can I go stop shootings in other places? Barely stop shootings here. Unreal says, care is a big deal in the philosophy of education. Nell Noddings is a key figure. Yeah. Chocolate says, although Honey Badger may love, he does not care. Yeah. And so there's like two things getting pushed together here, which may be the right thing to do, but it's just, there's big discussions. Unreal says, and gets extended in special expected ways to fields such as nursing, counseling, etc. Yeah, so there's a lot going on with care. A lot. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know it's a big topic. So, okay. So the author says, though, to care means to think, organize, evaluate, and plan, which gives love a rational component in addition to its emotional one. This way we can free love from the prejudice that is nothing but a noble emotion and show that it belongs in the canon of moral virtues connected with other virtues, especially justice. Love therefore transforms from a mere sentiment into a meaningful activity that is deeply rooted in the objective reality of human life. This view is consistent with Foote's claim that love is a virtue of care, closeness, and concern for the good and benefit of others. Latvian says, I'm distressed by the thought that most people under the age of 20 would not get that Honey Badger reference. Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, I'm getting old. Let's get off my lawn and shit, It's like, oh, you kids, you don't even know memes back in the day. And yeah, our memes back in the day were terrible. Terrible. And now the kids now have their 6-7 thing. And I'm supposed to be angry? I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Ethics don't care. Yeah, Chocolate says. Cosmo Alano says, my long-term romantic relationship ended this week. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope it is okay for you. I hope you're okay. And it's been pretty devastating emotionally. I actually came here to hide from the sadness. Twitch is good for that, so you're welcome, man. But this paper speaks to precisely the things I've been thinking in the last few weeks about what I wasn't doing that brought us to this point. I saw it coming. I just say all these personal details to explain why this makes so much sense to me right now. Maybe they're strongly getting at romance. Sorry for the essay message about. Thank you for reading this on stream and making me feel better. Like a lot of us, especially during pandemic times, we're using Twitch as an escape, so I completely get that, myself included. So I'm happy that stream is there for you. But yeah, that does suck though. That does suck. But like, yeah, like, not what am I gonna do on the other side of like Twitch? But it's like, I hope you're feeling like, I hope you get through it. That's all I can really do from here. Unreal says, care ethics is generally considered a feminist approach to things, though I wonder if that's a helpful way to look at it. Yeah, probably not. You can go back to the Heidegger if you want to be like, just go to the like rat bastard of the 20th century. Because he definitely talks about care. There's tradition in this area. I mean, he's in this tradition. So in the phenomenological tradition, talking about this stuff. But like, yeah. Hey, you're welcome, Cosmolano. There's definitely ways to frame it, Unreal Brian, that would be different. The question is, what's going to be most efficient? Reframing the discussion of care, or getting everyone to suck it up and stop hating feminist philosophy? And I think we're actually moving towards, at least for in the philosophy realm, the greater acceptance of feminist philosophy, which is a great fucking thing. But just let me add that. I think feminist philosophy is profile. I don't know if this is true, but I feel like the profile is getting raised. It's not like, oh, like the feminists, leave them alone, whatever, let them go off, do their thing. I feel like the feminist philosophy is getting a little bit better marketing, maybe it is. So I think maybe it's just like you just got to hold out and eventually it will be a bit better, but I don't know. Tomorrow says Bell Hook, notion of love and education is great, love to writing. Yeah, Bell Hooks is good. So, yeah, but it's kind of like, you're right, Unreal Brian. I don't know how to push like the better philosophy in terms of like, rhetoric, what people would accept. But I do feel like as time goes on, especially in like feminist epistemology, where like epistemology is finally getting away from justified true belief, the old sort of theories, and going more standpointy. And I feel like that's sort of raising the feminist profile, at least from my side. Latvian says treated in proper philosophy courses and not relegated to the blue-haired weirdos in GWS. Yeah. I feel like it's the profile's raised high enough that it's getting the respect it deserves. But I don't really know. But like, this is just from my like outside perspective. So I appreciate like you bringing in the comments, because it does matter. Okay. I was just saying, who was I talking to? Epistemology has been like the growth areas in epistemology are social epistemology. And it like that stuff is not necessarily feminist, but a lot of it is sort of out of the feminist epistemology, has like ties to like feminist epistemology. And like that's, so I feel like it's become more mainstream. They don't call it feminist epistemology, they call it social epistemology now. But like, hopefully they'll still reference the feminists, but like that's kind of now standard epistemology. Latvian says gender and women's studies. Yeah, I don't know what GWS. I don't know if there's actually widely used abbreviation. Yeah, I figured, well, when you said blue-haired weirdos, I knew what you meant. My friends, usually. Okay. So where were we? In this light, the virtue of love serves as a foundation for other moral virtues such as friendship, loyalty, and justice. These virtues are, in some ways, forms of love and anchored in the shared realities of human life. It is only because we share a common life form that we are able to understand the inclinations of other people, judge conflicts of interest, and settle them fairly. A person who cultivates love thus cultivates a holistic moral character. See, this is why I'm getting like... Well, and as was said earlier, I think by Cosmo, like it's a linguistic problem. What's a holistic moral character? Really, what is that? Now, you can have like a sort of a... I don't know what that is. Like, it's hard. Now, I could actually give you a Wittgensteinian account because I know something about this area, but just throwing this term out there right here is not like actually helping a whole lot. So... this is why it's like, well, what do you mean by love? Love is not a holistic moral character. Whatever a holistic moral character is, you could have a shitty holistic moral character, but like love cultivates whatever that thing is. Yeah, but what is that thing? Okay, rant over. A person who cultivates love thus cultivates a holistic moral character. Ultimately, the virtue of love makes us good people and enables us to perform our intrinsic ergon. Well, just as a bee needs its sting to fulfill its function, humans need virtues to realize their life form. The practice of love is not a burden, but the fulfillment of our very nature. It is the active expression of our fundamental rationality, a response to the real moral facts that define human flourishing. By recognizing and acting on the needs of others, a person becomes more fully human. This process of self-improvement is not an arbitrary act, but a rational pursuit of what is objectively good, ensuring that happiness and virtue are inextricably linked. The virtuous person finds joy not in selfish pleasure, but in the successful pursuit of good ends for all. What the fuck is a good end for all? Sounds very Kantian right there for a second. See, this is the problem. It's like, yes, but what does this actually amount to? Rocco says the fulfillment of our very nature sure is a bold statement. Yeah, and that's what makes me very uncomfortable. It's like, what is this good ends for all? What is the fulfillment of our very nature? It sounds very by definition. Like whatever is good is love, and love is by definition good. And so I don't know what the content is. Omnious. Yeah. Not obvious. Why can't you just say, and I want it? Yeah, well, I want it all. Give it me. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Valpo, don't hurt me. Unreal Brian, don't hurt me. Yeah. Love, along with sympathy, empathy, and compassion, directly connects us to the goodness of others. We do not wish to harm other people. On the contrary, we wish them all the best. Furthermore, love itself is not centered on relationships, but on persons. Yeah. Okay. Care as a virtue. All right. So now we're getting into like the nitty gritties of care, but like this is where there's a lot of discussion. No one really knows what love is. Granted, it seems like we defined it in like Author or Foot defined it in that earlier section as all the good stuff in life. Fine. But now the care stuff is what is big. The interpretation of care as a key aspect of love can be supported by the views of R. Halwani, who holds a stronger position than ours, arguing that care is a virtue in its own right, basing his reflections on Neo-Aristotelian virtue ethics, one of the key representatives of which is also Philippa Foot. In his project, Halwani subsumes care ethics under virtue ethics as its part. I will outline Halwani's main premise and arguments in favor of care as a virtue. According to Halwani, and I apologize how I'm saying your name, R. Halwani, I don't know if I'm getting it right. Care and love are crucial for our well-lived human life and represent an important activity, with love embodying care as a universal essential dimension. Virtues are traits necessary for a characteristically human life. A virtue is defined as the trait a person needs to flourish and lead a good life. 6 elements are key to the Neo-Aristotelian approach. It focuses on a flourishing life anchored in our nature. It stresses the necessity of virtues. It grants emotions an essential role in moral action, including moral training, and it rejects the mechanical application of moral rules or the existence of one ultimate principle, thereby emphasizing character. Unreal says, also one of my pet peeves is academic people writing pompously with the royal we. Why not? I like it. The only reason I'm complaining is because I get bored of saying I sometimes. Because in philosophy, you get to say I, but then you say it a lot and you're like, I don't want to say it anymore. I want to say we. Why the fuck not? Can't I be a plural human being? According to Halwani, who synthesizes the view of prominent care ethics theorists, the essential nature of care is defined by 3 necessary aspects. First, it relies on relational specificity, meaning care is primarily directed at particular individuals with whom the agent shares an existing relationship, distinguishing it from the universal focus of other moral attitudes. Second, care incorporates crucial cognitive and motivational components, engrossment, a deep cognitive and emotional preoccupation with the other's well-being, and motivational displacement, which shifts the agent's focus from self-interested to the benefit of the cared for. You can see the this cared for, like the carer and cared for. You can get this like sort of more complicated relationships of caring, cared for, like the general care. So like this is where it gets a little metaphysically complicated. This sort of like relationship between people and abilities and like things you notice. So yeah. Third, care possesses an emotive dimension, typically involving pleasure or feelings of attachment toward loved ones. In terms of action, acting from care is characterized by the use of intimate knowledge to tailor actions precisely to the cared for's unique needs. This is what I mean. So something different is like something special is going on in this concept of care where you understand them in a particular way and then treat the care to their specific way they are. This action is performed directly, notably without the mediation of moral principles often seen in justice reasoning. Crucially, while care is typically affective, Halwani stresses that emotional pleasure is not a necessary requirement. Actions stemming purely from commitment, like routine domestic tasks, are genuine expressions of care. And this is what I was saying, like, you know, you could be really good at, like, tending to your plants, and you may not love your plants, and you may not have, like, any other sort of commitment, but like no emotional pleasure, but like you may just be really good gardener. That may be the thing. Okay, so that's why you can separate out love and care. Okay, the central aim of Halwani's argumentation is to prove that care is a plausible candidate for being an excellence in a person and thus a virtue in line with the Neo-Aristotelian conception. According to this understanding, a trait is a virtue if it is necessary for human flourishing and makes the person good. Halwani supports his thesis by arguing that care is essential for our survival, development, and the ability to form relationships. Its status as a virtue is reinforced by inspiration from Aristotle's understanding of friendship, which is key to a flourishing life. If care is essential to philia, its importance is undeniable. Furthermore, Halwani emphasizes that care plays a crucial role in giving meaning to our lives, with this meaning arising directly in the act of caring for others, people, animals, or for artistic and sporting activities. The conclusion is that if we emphasize human flourishing, then without philia, we would not prosper, since intimate relationships are part of a flourishing life. And if caring is essential to philia, then its importance is evident. Therefore, care should be considered generally good trait to have and necessary to cultivate. K-Par asks, so to care for something means you choose to compare it to other things, like a preference rank? I don't think so. Like, where did you get that? You care for stuff where you get this sort of like intimate back and forth where you understand the needs of something else. And so it's not a compare to other things. It's a few paragraphs back. It's what I highlighted here is that you are tailoring, like with this line here, you tailor your understanding to something specific. Now, does that require comparison? Not inherently. You probably have to compare one thing to another to like understand it in a wider context. But as I understand care, it's sort of this hyper focused on the needs of whatever the cared for is and sort of adjusting your life and your care to accommodate the specific needs of that particular individual. I'm not an expert in this area, so I could be getting this wrong, but this is what I highlighted this sentence for a reason. In terms of action, acting from care is characterized by the use of intimate knowledge to tailor actions precisely to the cared for's unique needs. That doesn't inherently use comparison. It probably does in practice, but it's not essential. Okay. Okay, don't remember where I ended, but we'll read this paragraph. Halwani analyzes the status of care within virtue ethics, seeking to overcome the perceived tension arising from the common assumption that acting from care is merely spontaneous and emotional. He proposes treating care as a virtue, one of those traits contributing to a flourishing life. Virtue ethics, as a Neo-Aristotelian theory, claims it is rational to be virtuous because being virtuous is the most reliable path to achieving flourishing. By accepting care as a virtue, it transcends the status of a mere natural impulse and becomes an ethical quality. Halwani argues that virtue ethics naturally accommodates the care ethics emphasis on sociality, as both theories share the belief that human beings are inherently social and political animals who cannot flourish without certain relationships, such as friendship and family. The main tension arises in the ontological basis. While care ethics often treats relationships as ontologically basic, Halwani contends that virtue ethics posits the individual's flourishing as the ethically basic concept. Halwani concludes that while virtue ethics successfully accommodates care by granting it an important status among the virtues leading to the well-lived life, it does not accommodate the claim that relationships are ontologically basic. He reasons this is because relationships conceptually require the existence of individuals as nodes for the possibility, making the relationship secondary in this specific sense. Yeah, so there's a material thing that other people have to exist, and that somehow makes it less primary, because it relies on the material existence of other people to be in a relationship with. Now, I guess the problem then becomes, what is the metaphysics of virtue? Where do they actually exist? Are they in you as a disposition, or can the disposition actually bleed out into the social? And, that's one of these touchy metaphysical things, because people want to just have it very egoistic, like your virtues are your dispositions. But that could be like extended mind shit. You could probably push on that in different ways. And I don't even know if they would be so like mind centric back in ancient Greece with Aristotle. So it's like, there's some weird metaphysics going on here. But that's something I worry about. Probably not important. See, this is the question, Cosmolano. Ontologically basic means defined as what is in the world, the fundamental stuff. So like, if virtues are fundamental dispositions that we can have, well, that seems like it's part of us. It's some part of our disposition. Like, it's just part of what it is to be human. Now, if you care for another person or care for something else in the world, then it's a disposition that resides within you. That's fundamental, but then it also requires there being other stuff in the world, which makes it sound like, well, it's got multiple things going on. It makes it sound more complicated, less basic. It's not a fundamental thing in the world like a human disposition is, as far as we're concerned. So ontology is a study of what exists in the world, and basic is like, well, it's not combined with anything else. And so this part about combining our dispositions with others makes it sort of less basic, just sort of a combination of stuff. Yeah. All right. Let me know if you have any other questions about that. I spend too much time worrying about metaphysics and ontology and things like that. Okay, Holwani rejects the obligation that acting from care, often viewed as spontaneous and emotional, conflicts with moral action governed by reason. Instead, he proposes viewing care as a virtue, an ethical quality rather than a mere natural impulse. Holwani asserts that virtue ethics easily accommodates the emotiveness of care because, within the Aristotelian view, emotions are part of rational action. The virtuous person acts with love and the correct associated tender emotions. He demonstrates the harmony between emotion and reason through the three Aristotelian conditions for virtuous action. 1. Acting with knowledge. Caring action stems from the agent's moral wisdom and reflection. Emotional motivation coexists with the awareness that this, quote, is the right thing to do, end quote. Cosmolana says, I was confused by basic. I was taking it with a connotation instead of technically. Okay, yeah. In this area, when they say ontologically basic, it's the technical version. Yeah. Ain't no basic bitch ontology. What's up, Katie? How you doing? What's going on? He's partying it up. I hope you're feeling better. I was lurking your stream because I'm trying to avoid spoilers for Expedition 33 myself. But everyone should go check out The Professor's Wife X. She is actually a professor's wife. If y'all don't know Prof for Prof, that's his better half there in chat. But yeah, Katie is a musician and does a lot of music analysis on stream. Listen to music, having a good time, does a lot of gaming, and makes lots of jingles. So she's good at what she does. Kind of fun over there. So if you don't know Katie, go give her a follow. But yeah. Ugh. I'm going to try to request the Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas is You, if you don't murder me one of these days. I kind of am amused by the song. So no, of course interrupt. That's the whole point of the damn stream. If it was just me reading books, I could do that on YouTube. What were we doing though? Oh yeah. So Morgan, I bet could crush it. Well, of course, but Morgan is fucking great. I wanted it like between the two of you though. I think like between the two of you, you could have some fun. Oh, that'd be funny though. All I want for Christmas is you. All right. Hell yeah, game on. There we go. Yeah, like make it cool again. And being from New York, I get there's a little bit of Mariah hate, and she entirely deserves it at this point. But you have to remember, Mariah Carey had a #1 hit every fucking year of the 90s. She had a full decade of #1s. Like, no one else does that. Like, that puts her in, like, the groups with, like, Frank Sinatra and, like, the other greats. Like, she did shit in pop music that doesn't happen anymore and didn't happen before. So it's like, as like someone from New York, I'm like, hell yeah, Mariah, you get it. All right. Madonna did. Oh, so I'm not surprised. Yeah, but like that's what I mean. It's like Mariah Carey and Madonna. Sure, fine. Did y'all see that 50 Made a P. Diddy documentary that people have been plotting for 20 years? 50 Cent is one of the most petty motherfuckers on the face of the earth. And he just keeps on with it. It is amazing. Like, I don't know. Like, that guy just has like some like grand pettiness to him. That's amazing in some sense. And he does stuff. Yeah, he is a gangster, but like, he's petty as fuck. He's petty. Yeah, he plays chess too. Yes. Unreal says Mariah has a credible voice, but she kind of became a caricature of herself. Yeah, well, who was it? It was Chappelle that said it's like, look, you don't do the things Mariah did without being like incredibly good and smart and talented and all that shit. But the media industry, and Chappelle knows, he ran off like to his farm. Like it fucking kills you. It drives you insane. So it's like, yeah, things happen to her, but like you can't take away from what she did. No one gets out of any of this alive. Like, none of us get out of this alive. It's all dirty. It is good, yeah. The doc is good. Okay, yeah. Good to know. Yeah. Maracas Skullman. My stand mixer broke, so I had to whip meringue by hand. And man, I can see why Joe Biden famously said, I am in the kitchen doing reverse slavery whipping. What the hell is wrong with you? What the hell are you talking about? This doesn't even make sense. Try to make more sense, Maracas. Like, I don't get this at all. Like, if you're just talking nonsense here, I don't care. Anyway, we were reading this paper on the virtue of care. And so, yeah, bazinga, yeah. Okay, so the second condition for virtuous action from Aristotle is 2. Acting from choice for its own sake. The agent acts because the action is caring in itself. Alwani addresses the spontaneity objection by noting that the virtuous agent possesses the skill of quick and correct judgment, allowing for swift action that is nonetheless reasoned. 3. Acting from a firm and unchanging state. This relates to the reliability of character, encompassing correct thought, action, and the correct emotional response and motivation. Halwani concludes that virtuous caring action is typically emotive, but its emotiveness is fully aligned with the agent's knowledge and action from virtuous rational reasons. The action is virtuous precisely due to the presence of the correct rational and emotional responses, showing that virtue ethics robustly accommodates the demands of care ethics regarding emotions. It's regarding reference to a joke with Joe Biden as a rude chef. Okay, what does that have to do with anything, Maracas? Like, okay, but sure. I don't know that joke, and I wasn't talking about that stuff. Like, cool, but why? The concept of care fits within the virtue ethics framework according to Halwani, provided it meets 2 essential criteria. First, that it aligns with the fundamental definition of virtue, especially concerning emotions, and second, that it is necessary for human flourishing and for making a person good. Now, I think this is like all playing into the, like this, what the author is doing here is playing into the crowd, but like the care people, of course, like care. So, yeah, and you're going to be able to shoehorn it in. Now, being able to like, do a really good job caring for somebody. So like my grandma was in the ICU for a while, and the ICU nurses were like, you could see these were the really fucking good nurses. They really were on top of all their stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's a function of there being more of them, getting paid better, having better hours and all that. But they were like, when the nurses actually had the opportunity to like provide good care, they really did. And does that make them a good person? I don't know, but like the level of care my grandma got in the ICU versus in the regular hospital, you could see that they were really on top of their shit. And does that make them a good person? I don't know, but they were fucking great nurses. Like, they were really, really good. So it's like exactly how this goes to making the individual a good person, I'm not sure, but damn, were they good at what they were doing in the hospital. Now, the funny thing is, my mom's and dad's old primary care doctor was kind of in the Nietzschean version of this. He has an ego. And he does a really fucking good job, but there's some ego there. He's always trying to do the best job because he likes to think of himself as a fucking good doctor. And so it's like, is he a good person? No, he's not a bad person. I don't think he's bad at all. But it's like, there's a little bit of ego behind it too. Chocolate says, who cares as long as the society gets it done? Exactly. But like, this is the question. Like, what is actually good making for a person? I don't know. That was a terrible arrow. That was the worst arrow. There we go. So what makes a person good? I don't know. But it seems like it does help if you can pay attention to more stuff. Okay. Central to the first criterion is the Aristotelian notion that virtues are dispositions not only to act rightly, but also to feel and exhibit emotions correctly. Awani argues that care, although it manifests as a cluster of appropriate emotions, desires, and feelings, such as liking, sympathy, and empathy, rather than a single emotion, provides strong support for its status as an important virtue, as it is defined by the disposition to appropriately feel this cluster towards particular close others. Rocket says, is there a counter to David Hume's ought from an is argument against moral realism? I've had to see one that doesn't just push the problem back. There are, people have discussed that, for a long time. I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't thought about that for a while, but like we could look that up later, if you're still around. Yeah. Unreal says, I worked for a bit for an ophthalmologist who was one of the world's top retina disease researchers, and he could often be a complete asshole, but I trust him to be my eye doctor. Exactly. It's like, that's the old, it's the House, like the House TV show. The guy was a dickhead, but he knew that he was needed as a doctor because like it didn't matter if he was a dickhead because he was such a good doctor. And that was kind of, I remember there was an episode where someone asked him like, why are you this way? And he said, I realized that people aren't going to like me because I'm a dick, but if I'm a really good doctor, I still will get by. And they were like, yeah, but why don't you just be less of a dick then? But like he said that, like that was part of the character. It's like, yeah, you still have value in society if you get really good at something. Yeah, let's see. Cosmolano says, if a good person has no ego and a good person either doesn't exist or if a good person has no ego, a good person either doesn't exist or doesn't do much. Well, you could be humble. You don't have to be a dick about it is the thing. Yeah. So I missed your comment earlier. Professor's Wife X says, there's also the dopamine element of doing good things where some people just do good things frequently but aren't actually good. Yeah, that's right. So it's like you get the feedback for whatever it is and you're just doing it for the feedback. That's also fair. Don't trust a nice lawyer. Guess that goes the same with doctors. Yeah. Well, again, there's no reason why this needs to be separate here. But the point here is that the Nietzschean point earlier still holds. Now, Philippa says that's not going to hold all the time. And Philippa Foot's probably right also. But separating this out looks a little bit messy. What's up, Adam? How you doing? Unreal says, I forgot, though, that I watched most of the series. Was House and Ass before the injury and med addiction? Oh, I don't know. I don't know enough about this series either. I think the backstory in the episode I watched basically said that he didn't care about others because he knew he was a good enough doctor, that he would always be needed. Now, I think what the story was that he was in a military kid and his like parents were in the military and he was in Japan and he saw that someone from the wrong class, like social class, was getting asked questions in a hospital because that guy knew the answers and the doctors weren't that good, but he couldn't get hold of a good job because he was, somehow not liked in the Japanese society. And he said, I saw at that point that it didn't matter what the person was like as long as he had the right answers. Yeah. You missed a Philippa Foot paper? Yes, we're getting towards the end here. Sorry about that. So we've been talking about care ethics and virtues. Yeah. Yeah, peach tea, it's like don't trust a nice lawyer, don't trust a skinny chef, these sorts of things. But again, there's Ozempic nowadays. There's plenty of nice lawyers out there. It's those are really bad heuristics. So, we just have to sort of take it though. Like the background theories on this stuff, like what actually goes into a virtue. This is a long criticism of virtue ethics. I don't know if anyone knows exactly what a virtue is, but we just sort of take it. These are the things that make up a good life somehow. Okay. So yeah, so the fact that you can like have this cluster of things that go into care, that is supposed to make your life good somehow. Okay, the second criterion is also strongly affirmed. Care is a necessary virtue because it is essential for an individual's well-being and for forming intimate relationships. As recipients, care is indispensable for developing morally and psychically healthy persons, enabling them to live well. As givers, the capacity to care is crucial for entering into intimate relationships, such as with friends and family, which provide support, enrich life, and fundamentally give life meaning. Furthermore, care is fundamentally crucial for human flourishing qua human being because a lack of adequate care in infancy severely damages the essential trait of rationality by impairing linguistic and mental capacities. Since rationality and sociality are necessarily connected, this capacity for reasoning is indispensable for a human social animal. Unreal says, I have known doctors who are both nice and really good. My current ophthalmologist happens to be one such. Lawyers, however, yeah, I mean, there's a variety of people. Moroccan says, unless we assume a form of moral realism, isn't the answer to what counts as a virtue subjective and or relative? Yeah, so Maracas, earlier in the paper, Philippa made arguments to that effect. Now, they're not going to be knocked down, like everyone's going to agree on them, arguments, but Philippa Foot does put arguments forward to that effect. So we're in the area of moral realism. So absolutely. Yeah, we got to use a qua. So, qua, for people who don't know Latin, just means so human flourishing qua human being. So what it is as specifically a human flourishing as specifically a human being. But yeah. So, yeah, just to finish up to Maracas' question, this is in the moral realism tradition, and Philippa gave arguments to that effect. Like, do you buy them? That's different, but we're doing that right now. Helwani concludes that care satisfies the two necessary criteria for a trait to be a virtue. Therefore, it is plausible to consider care not only as a virtue, but as an important one. Alongside virtues like justice, honesty, and proper pride, care takes its place as a virtue essential for living well. Oh, quid quem, yes. No, God. Oh, now we're doing Latin. Conclusion. For too long, philosophy defined as the love of wisdom has neglected the study of love itself, favoring the intellect over the heart. Modern virtue ethics, including the work of Philippa Foot, has rectified this imbalance, demonstrating that love can be a genuine virtue. In this paper, we have argued that the most compelling way to understand this virtue is to highlight care as a key aspect of love. Maracas says, I arrived later to the stream and I'm a moral anti-realist. What are some of the arguments they made in favor of it? Okay, so yeah. There was a quick analogy for anyone who wasn't here at the beginning and can go over this fast. He said, look, if you're like a bee and you find some food, some nectar, you go back to the hive and you do your little wiggle dance to tell all the other people of the hive where you found all the good food. If you are a human and you find like a water source when everyone's thirsty and you don't go and you don't tell anyone else that needs water where the water is, you're a shitty person. You're a bad person. And so it's not just a matter of survival. There is a moral aspect to it that if you don't help people who are in need, you're a shit human. And that's the real fact that, like, if you find a water source for people who are dehydrated, you should let them know where the water is. And that is a moral realist standpoint. It's not anything. It's just the same as, like, the bee tells the hive where the food is. If you don't tell other people who are dying of thirst where the water is, you're a shit person. Unreal Brian says, I say joking, but it is not entirely. You get is from ought. What you ought to do it is what it is the case you should do. Yeah. Bottle all that shit up and charge $3, baby. Yeah. So yeah. Unreal says, I'm with Aristotle. I'm thinking of ethics along the lines of a type of practical reason. Yeah. But like that's this whole area, this virtue ethics, is that It's phronesis, what the wise person does, what the good person does. It's a kind of reasoning, a practical reason. Yeah, yep. Like I said, Marcus, it's going to be sort of this really basic sort of version where, like, you're not going to let someone die when you have the means to save them and it's not a big deal. But I don't know how much you can get out of that, but these are the sorts of statements she would make. Also, she's argued against Nietzsche, saying that, look, parents caring for their kids is real care. And you could say, well, it's also plays into evolution. It's like, sure, but people actually feel this way. This is how they think about it. This is how they self-report about it. So there's no reason for you to be like, well, you're lying. It's just self-interested. Like, that would be excessive to just assume everyone just doesn't really care about their kids. They're doing it out of evolutionary motivations. Yeah, you get that the argument still suffers against the ought is problem. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't say there was going to be knocked down. In this area, this is just sort of ideas going towards why someone might consider it to be real. That's all. That's all it is. We're not solving the is-ought problem here today. Just not going to happen. Okay, let's finish this up though. Our analysis has shown that love is not a blind sentiment but can become a learned disposition of the will that has both cognitive and emotional components. It is rooted in objective facts about human flourishing and is protected from cynical reduction to mere egoism. Love is a disposition focused on fulfilling the needs of oneself and others, leading to harmony between motives and reasons. Love is not just something that happens, it is something that is done. Can I link this paper? Go. Yeah, exclamation point paper for anyone new to chat. You can always type in, and that usually pulls up the link. No, up, PHT, the up is me for updating paper. That way, after I do up, then you can do paper. But that's what UP is update the paper command. That's why I do up. Yeah. Yeah. It's all my bot stuff. I wrote all of this shit. Where was I? Yeah. We argued that the most important aspect of love is care. This interpretation not only satisfies Foote's formal and content criteria, but also highlights the active and practical nature of love. Love is a conscious activity concerned with helping every living being to flourish according to its kind. It is the active core that unites various forms of affection, including agape, eros, and philia, demonstrating that it is more than a mere feeling. More than a feeling. All right. This view of care as an aspect of love allows for a unified understanding of our relationships, from the personal bonds to broader social and ethical obligations. To firmly establish care as a core ethical quality, we relied on the work of R. Halwani, who rigorously demonstrates that care is a plausible candidate for being an important virtue within the Neo-Aristotelian framework. Paper, please? No. Yeah, well, if you add anything more, I think it doesn't work, but yeah. My shitty programming. But yeah, just paper does. Worth a try? Yep. Well, yeah, as I always say, because I know what time the Tindaris is not in my time zone, I always say, your health is more important than my stream, so I care for you. It's like, please sleep. Oh, I feel bad sometimes. I'm like, I'm sorry, Europeans. Awani proves that care satisfies the necessary criteria concerning emotions, arguing that it is a disposition to feel and exhibit a cluster of appropriate emotions like empathy and sympathy toward particular others, thus aligning emotion with rational action. Furthermore, he defends care against the objection that its actions are merely impulsive by satisfying the three Aristotelian conditions for virtuous action: acting with knowledge, acting from choice for its own sake, and acting from a firm and unchanging state. Awani establishes that care is a reasoned, reliable, and ethical quality. This robust analysis affirms that care is not just an impulse, but a reasoned disposition where emotiveness goes hand in hand with the agent's moral wisdom. For Foote, the content of love as a virtue is tied to natural necessities, the objective facts about what a living thing needs to flourish according to its specific life form. These needs are not just subjective desires, but moral facts that constitute a meta-normative framework for action. In this sense, love is a disposition to recognize and respond to these needs in oneself and others. As M. Hanel notes, any ethics that takes love seriously must be oriented towards the irreducible facts of human life, a principle that extends to all living things. Halwani's work decisively supports the necessity of care for human flourishing, which is the critical criterion for any virtue. He demonstrates that care is indispensable for developing into a morally and psychologically healthy individual, both as recipients during dependency and as givers who seek to engage in intimate, life-enriching relationships. Crucially, by highlighting how a lack of care impairs the essential human trait of rationality, a point echoed by McIntyre, Halwani establishes that care is a necessary trait for us to flourish qua human beings. This makes care an essential virtue alongside justice and honesty necessary for living well. Unreal says, but I would say, and it would take some time to flesh this out, that should I X is not a freestanding question hanging out there. In practice, it will come with context, and given that context will boil down to a practical question. It will always end up being a potentially infinite chain of means and connections, but that never crashes out to a deontological ought. And this is why ethics is a pain in the butt. What should we do? And this is sort of... this goes back to the eternal return, depending on how you frame it. So, like, should you do this? Like, in the grand scheme of things, like if you had to do it a million times over, would you? Or in the Heideggerian version where you don't know what the future is, it's opaque, you don't know what the history is, there's always a giant, like as you said, too many different things coming in and too many different ways out. So the question is, when you don't have any real understanding of the future or how you got there, do you do it anyway? And so it's like, this is a sort of like what makes you want to do that? And that's the existential question. Maraka says his papers make a lot of evolutionary claims about human nature. Is using any ethnographic data to support his claim? None whatsoever, Marakas. This is just sort of assumes that we need this stuff and it's fundamental. Like I said, this is just sort of a take it or leave it position. This is not trying to be a knockdown argument. This is trying to describe what happens in this area that once Philippa Foot has sort of taken moral realism in this kind of way. It's not arguing for moral realism. This is the consequences of it in Philippa Foot's philosophy. It's just, that's what the paper is. Yeah. Okay. Therefore, love as care is not merely an abstract philosophical concept. It has a fundamental practical significance that is expressed in our personal relationships, in child rearing, and even in how we build our society. It shows that truly functional and humane institutions, such as hospitals or social services, cannot survive without people who possess the virtue of love. Put simply, a good system is not enough. It needs to be filled by a good person. Ultimately, it is the virtue of love that serves as the foundation for other moral virtues such as friendship, justice, and loyalty. Love is an inseparable part of human nature. Since we are beings who can only flourish in relationships, it is the virtue that enables us to reach and develop our potential. Love is not only a path to a good life, but also its fulfillment. By practicing caring love, we become more complete human beings as we find joy in contributing to the good of society as a whole. All right, cool. And as always, what we get to do now is we get to rate the paper. If you're in chat, all the people here, you get to spam some emotes and tell me how you feel about the paper. If you thought this was fun and made your brain dance, give it a brain dance. Spelling and capitalization do count here. If you talked about existential or artistic drama, some social stuff, nog scream. If this is for deep and ancient ideas, give it an Ouroboros, a nog oro. Also a nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments, for like some technical magic and arguing for stuff. Nog navel, navel gazing only for academics. Nog turd, all style no substance. The previous one was nog navel. This is nog turd. It's all style no substance. Still poop underneath. And nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and my vote meh. Note anything in the green makes the overall score go up. Anything in the red makes the overall score, which I calculate, go down. And the vote meh pushes everything to the middle. Chocolate Mints says it was a meh paper. Thank you for rating, Chocolate. Yeah, so you're quite interested in the topic, says O'Brien, but I felt this paper was a hot ball of mess. Yeah, this was not... DeMarshall gave it a knife. Yeah, see, this is kind of like we were saying early, like we never seen this journal before, don't know like what they're doing in this journal. This felt a little bit kind of like a summary in some sense. Nog lint, yes, just lint. And it seems like, okay, they're just going over the argument and putting together some other stuff. I feel like, you know, this is not like it's on the shorter side. It's not like terribly short, but like it didn't have a whole lot. It made one small claim that love could be taken as a virtue in this schema, and then argued for that. What's the greater significance here? It's just pointing out how we should understand Philippa Foot. It's kind of just explaining Philippa Foot's position, and that's it. It's not applying it. It's not really saying like how it should be viewed versus other accounts. It's not really doing a whole lot with it. So it's like, not the worst, but then again, it was very modest in its ambitions. Like very, very modest. Like it didn't do much either. Unreal says, I'm sure that Foot's works would be more rewarding. Yeah, maybe. So yeah. Rocco, did you mean to give an actual meh, or because you have to do vote meh? If you meant to, I can fix it if you did, or you can do it yourself. Yeah, like in some sense, like I was saying earlier, what's the philosophical point here? Is it just to learn about Philippa Foot? Okay, but like again, not crazy, not too crazy. Thank you, Maracas, for voting. Yeah. What am I gonna say? We found something for next time. Cool. You could throw it up in the philosophy in my Discord philosophy section. It's a good way to save stuff. Are blog articles okay? Yeah. So what am I gonna say? Well, hey, short's better. I like that. I'm gonna go with the scream. We are talking about how we're supposed to live with care. So that is like this is making claims about existential stuff. So I'm gonna give it a scream. I'm gonna give it a non-naval because it was really just like you have to really care about Philippa because they didn't really put a lot of effort into telling us why the rest of us should care about this. What level academically was the author of this paper? So I don't it said, let me look real fast if this person's here. They're not on doesn't say immediately. So I don't know. This just says Department of Philosophy and History of Philosophy of Arts, Michal Chabada. I don't know. For all I know, this just isn't a full professor. This might be a grad student because it just says what they are. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Like they did a competent job as far as writing stuff. Now, was it super interesting? No, but it didn't feel like they fucked it up either. So Marcus says, I feel like if they're a PhD student, I'd say it's a good effort. If they're a tenure prof, then it's kind of meh. Well, we're judging the paper on its, on its own merits. And it's like, yeah, most people are giving it kind of a meh thing also. Adam, thank you for rating. So yeah, yeah, I mean, I gave it a scream and a naval. What else should I give it? I mean, it's like, it's an okay thing, but like, yeah, it's just not, yeah, it's kind of meh. Yeah. Tenir says it's called The Limits of Certainty, How Epistemic Restraint Produces More Reliable Knowledge. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, okay. This is how we're going to go. 60 more seconds if you want to get your rating in. Like, it wasn't written badly. It was written okay. But, like, who knows? Who knows? Let's see. What was I clicked on? Michal Chabada. It looks like they've got a bunch of publications. So they're probably a professor somewhere. But, like, they just didn't, they just wrote this up. They got it published. Good on them. That's all it is. Yep, thank you for being here, DeMarshall. Marcus says, and honestly, Mez, find a lot of family or academics. There's an incentive to produce research when you have to. Exactly. Go get your rating on Cosmolao. So I thought the ideas were interesting in a particular way that made sense to me, but I appreciate there is idiosyncrasy. Yeah, it's not a bad paper. It's just, it's not, as far as like the wider philosophy goes, it's not like super interesting. That's not a problem. It's like, that's okay. Like, it's just fine. And like, so it's just a fine paper. There's not a whole lot to it, but then again, they didn't overstate their claims either. So like, it was all just all right.